My daughter didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just looked me in the eye and said, "You can't live here anymore, Mom." No emotion, no hesitation. Her husband stood behind her, arms folded, like a guard dog protecting stolen treasure. I had paid off his gambling debt, $120,000, just months before. I signed over the house to help them feel secure. And now the home I built, the kitchen where I taught her to cook, the garden I planted with my husband's ashes beneath the roses. They were kicking me out of all of it, like I was the burden. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when my daughter Rebecca was my entire world. I can still remember the way her tiny fingers would wrap around mine when she was a baby, like she never wanted to let go. And truthfully, neither did I. Her father, Martin, passed away far too young. A heart attack at 46. One moment we were laughing in the living room watching an old Western. The next I was calling 911 with shaking hands and a scream I didn't recognize bursting from my throat. He was gone before the ambulance arrived. From that day forward, it was just me and Rebecca. I was 42, widowed and scared. But I didn't have time to be scared. I picked up every nursing shift I could. Days, nights, doubles. I'd work 16 hours straight and still come home to tuck her in and read bedtime stories, even if my voice was cracking and my feet were blistered. She loved when I'd act out the voices, especially for Charlotte's Web. Her giggle when I did Templeton the Rat kept me alive. We were close. Unbreakably close, I thought. Every birthday I handmade her cake. Every parent-teacher night I was there. Even if I was in scrubs and had mascara smudged under my eyes. I made sure she never felt the emptiness her father's absence left. I filled that space with love, structure, warmth. When she got into college, full scholarship, I cried the whole ride home after dropping her off. Not because I was sad, but because I was so proud. My little girl, the first in our family to go to university. I remember whispering to Martin's photo on the kitchen wall, "We did it, love. She's going to be okay." And she was. For a while. She met Daniel in her second year, charming, ambitious, the kind of man who made people feel like they were the only person in the room. He had that salesman sparkle. I'll admit, I liked him at first. He brought her flowers, held doors, called me mom from the start. They married right after graduation. A small ceremony in our backyard. Rebecca wore my old wedding veil, and Daniel cried when he saw her walk down the aisle. I remember thinking maybe he really loves her. Maybe she'll be safe. When they struggled financially, Rebecca couldn't find work right away, and Daniel had a string of bad luck with startups. I offered to let them move in. It wasn't a question. That house had too many empty rooms, and I wanted to help. First, it was good. I loved having them there. Sunday dinners were lively again. Rebecca and I would cook together like we used to. She'd hum while chopping vegetables, and I'd pretend not to notice when she added too much salt. Felt like family again. Then Daniel's bad luck started to snowball. Missed credit card payments. Constant calls from unknown numbers. Rebecca always covered for him. "It's just a misunderstanding. He's got a plan." I believed her. I wanted to believe her. Then one day she came to me crying. Daniel had borrowed money from the wrong people. A lot of money. Gambling debts. $120,000 worth. I remember sitting in silence, staring at her blotchy face, her hands shaking. She said they were getting threats. She didn't ask directly, but the implication was clear. If I didn't step in, something bad could happen. And so, I did what any mother would do. I paid it. I cashed out the last of my retirement fund. Sold off Martin's antique watch collection. Took out a reverse mortgage on the house. Every penny went toward wiping Daniel's slate clean. I told myself it was a one-time thing. That he would get help. That things would go back to normal. And for a while it seemed like they did. They thanked me. They bought me flowers. Daniel cooked dinner twice that month and even cleaned the dishes. Rebecca hugged me from behind one morning and whispered, "I don't know what we'd do without you." But something had shifted. Rebecca stopped helping around the house. Daniel started answering calls in hushed voices again. They began referring to the home as ours instead of Mom's. I brushed it off. Told myself it was just a phase. Looking back now, I realize how blind I was. How desperate I was to hold on to the illusion of closeness. I didn't want to see what was changing. I didn't want to believe my daughter, my baby girl, could be anything other than the sweet, loving soul I'd raised. But she wasn't that little girl anymore. And I was no longer her safe place. I was just in the way. Started with small things. A missed good morning. A door left closed when it used to be open. I would come into the kitchen and find Rebecca and Daniel mid-conversation, only for them to fall silent the moment I walked in. Daniel's eyes would linger a second too long before he looked away. Rebecca would force a smile, not warm, not real. Just polite. Distant. First I chalked it up to stress. They were young, married, trying to find their footing again after the debt disaster. I told myself not to take it personally. I even joked once, trying to lighten the mood. You two are like little squirrels hiding nuts when I walk in. Rebecca just said, "We're adults, Mom. We need some privacy." That stung. Not the words, the tone. Cold. Measured. Like I was a tenant, not her mother. I noticed Daniel started doing things without asking. He canceled the cable plan and signed up for streaming services, then got upset when I couldn't figure out the remote. He changed the kitchen layout. More efficient, he said, and I couldn't find my old measuring cups for days. I asked Rebecca if we could at least leave the spice rack alone. She rolled her eyes and said, "It's not a museum, Mom. Things change." Then there was the mail. One morning I found a letter addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Daniel Carter, our home's address beneath. My name was nowhere on it. A strange sort of chill ran down my back. I opened it, feeling guilty as I did, but also afraid. It was a pre-approved refinancing offer. Large numbers, low interest, large font promises. I left it on the counter without saying anything. That night it was gone. The next week, I came home from the grocery store and found Daniel in the living room with two men in suits. I asked if everything was okay. He smiled too wide and said, "Just some business prospects, Mom." But one of the men was holding the deed folder from the home office. I hadn't given that folder to anyone. That was when I started locking my bedroom door at night. I told myself it was just to feel secure, nothing more. But deep down I knew something was unraveling. It wasn't just about privacy or stress or age differences. Something was changing. Something fundamental. And I was the only one who noticed or cared. The dinners became quieter. I'd ask Rebecca about her job search and she'd shrug, eyes on her phone. I asked Daniel if he needed help organizing bills, and he'd chuckle like I'd offered him crayons. "No offense, Mom, but your generation isn't exactly known for financial brilliance." That one stayed with me. It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it, as if I were some relic, some doddering fool he barely tolerated. The same man who took every dime I had left to clean up his mess. Even the house felt colder. They replaced the warm yellow curtains with gray ones. "Modern," they said. My potted plants disappeared from the windowsills. The photo of Martin and me on our wedding day, the one that had been on the mantel for 30 years, was suddenly tucked into a drawer. I found it while cleaning one afternoon, face down, frame chipped. I didn't say anything. I didn't know how. Rebecca, my sweet Becca, had once asked me every day how I was feeling, even as a child. "You okay, Mama?" she'd say, patting my hand. That version of her, the one with wide eyes and a heart too big for her body, felt like someone I'd dreamed up. Now she barely looked at me unless she wanted something. One evening I made her favorite chicken pot pie from scratch. I waited for them to come to the table. They were upstairs talking, laughing. When they finally came down, Rebecca took one bite and said, "It's a little bland, Mom. You okay?" I nodded, pushing my own plate away. My appetite had left long before they came down. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room, staring at the darkened hallway. The silence in the house felt thick. Like grief. Not the loud crying kind, but the kind that sits in your bones. I remembered Martin, how he used to hum while fixing the sink. How he always told Rebecca, "Respect your mama. She's tougher than she looks." I remembered her asking once, "Will I be like her when I grow up?" And Martin had smiled and said, "If you're lucky." Now she barely spoke to me unless it was to correct me, dismiss me, or ignore me altogether. I tried to think, was there a moment it changed? A single instant when love turned to resentment? But the truth is, it didn't happen all at once. It was a slow erosion. A drawer left open. A tone of voice. A missed thank you. A turn back. One by one, they added up until I was a stranger in my own home. Unwelcome. Unneeded. Rebecca used to beg me to braid her hair before bed. Now she passed me in the hallway like I was a ghost. Maybe I had become one. The first time I truly felt humiliated, I wasn't even supposed to be part of the conversation. It was a Saturday morning, and I'd woken up early like always. My body still moved on the rhythm of hospital shifts, even though I hadn't worn scrubs in years. I brewed my tea, stepped out to water the garden, and when I came back inside I heard them, Daniel and Rebecca, talking in the kitchen. They didn't hear me come in. I froze just beyond the archway, the warm mug in my hand growing colder by the second. "She's not going to live forever," Daniel was saying, his voice low but sharp. "And when she's gone, the house is ours anyway. Why wait?" Rebecca didn't respond immediately. I heard the sound of her spoon clinking against her coffee cup. "I know," she said finally. "But it feels weird. She raised me here. So? We're the ones who'll build a future here. Not her. You said you wanted kids, right? You want them sharing a house with your mom hovering around." Silence. "I just don't want to fight with her." Daniel scoffed. "You won't have to. You'll spin it like you're concerned for her. Say it's about her health, independence, whatever. Just ease her out." I didn't hear the rest. I stepped back outside, my hands trembling so badly I nearly dropped the cup. The tea had gone cold. So had I. That afternoon I said nothing. I told myself maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe they were speaking in hypotheticals. I gave them the benefit of the doubt because that's what mothers do. We hope, even when the truth is unbearable. But then came Rebecca's birthday. She wanted to host a small dinner. Just some friends, she said. Casual. I offered to cook, of course. It was a tradition. Every year, I made her favorite lemon-roasted chicken, rosemary potatoes, and my caramel custard for dessert. I spent the whole day preparing, cleaned the entire house, set the table with the good china Martin and I received on our wedding day, ironed the cloth napkins. When she walked in with her guests, her eyes skimmed the dining room and then narrowed. "Mom," she said, tight-lipped, "we weren't planning a sit-down dinner. It's a mingle thing. Finger food. Music. You didn't have to do all this." I blinked. "But you always," I thought. Daniel stepped in, flashing that smile he thought could fix anything. "It's fine, really. We'll just move it to the patio. More space anyway." He and Rebecca began clearing the table, not carefully. My china clinked against itself in his rushed hands. "No thank you." No smile. Her friends arrived, loud and young, brushing past me like I was invisible. One of them even said, "Oh, you must be the maid." Rebecca didn't correct her. I stayed in the kitchen, pretending to tidy up, listening to the laughter echo down the hallway. At one point I peeked out, and Rebecca was showing them the house like it was hers. "This'll be the nursery," she said, gesturing to my bedroom. Eventually. Later that night, after the guests left, I sat on the patio, staring at the cold remains of the custard no one touched. Rebecca came out, barefoot, a wine glass in hand. "You okay?" she asked, but her voice was empty. I nodded. She sat across from me, swirling her drink. "Look, I know things feel different. And I appreciate everything you've done. But Daniel and we need space. You understand, right?" "Space," I repeated. "In the house I bought. The house I paid for." She sighed, clearly annoyed. "Why do you always throw that in my face?" "Because I gave you everything," I said, louder than I meant. "I gave you my savings, my time, my home. And now I'm being pushed out like I'm some inconvenience." She looked away, then back, and something changed in her expression, something harder. "You make it really difficult to talk to you, Mom. You hold everything over our heads. You act like we owe you our lives." I stood, my chair scraping the stone. "You do." She flinched. "Just slightly. I didn't ask you to sacrifice everything," she said quietly. "You chose to." That was when I knew. She didn't see it as love. She saw it as obligation and now resentment. I went to bed early that night, but I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, remembering the sound of her laugh when she was 5. The way she used to hug me so tight my ribs hurt. And now she was planning a nursery in my room. I was no longer part of her future. I was just an obstacle in her way. The next day I started keeping a notebook. Just a plain little thing from the dollar store. In it, I wrote down every incident, every phrase, every shift in tone. I didn't know why, maybe to prove to myself I wasn't going mad. Maybe because for the first time in my life, I felt I'd need proof that I mattered. I told myself I'd wait. I'd watch. And when the time came, when they made their next move, I'd be ready. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I found the file. Daniel had left his laptop open on the kitchen counter while he took a call outside. I hadn't meant to look. Truly. But as I walked by, a document caught my eye, bold title, clear as day. Power of Attorney Transfer Draft 3. My stomach dropped. I clicked. My hands were shaking as the screen loaded. I knew it wasn't right. I knew I should close it and pretend I hadn't seen. But something deeper, something more primal, kept me there. There were multiple files. Drafts of letters, scanned forms. Plans for refinancing the house, with Daniel's name as the primary homeowner. Notes about converting my bedroom into a rental unit. Budget breakdowns. One of the files even said, Care Home Options Proximity Search. They were preparing to move me out. Not eventually. Not years down the line. Soon. When Daniel came back in, I shut the laptop, sat at the table, and smiled like nothing had happened. My heart was pounding. My mind raced. But my face stayed still. That evening, I faked a headache and went to bed early. I locked the door, pulled out my notebook and wrote everything down. Every file name I remembered, every word I could recall. I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, hearing Rebecca's voice in my head from when she was 9. I'd never let anyone take you away, Mommy. Never ever. She had meant it then. But now she was plotting behind my back. Like I was a problem to be solved. The next morning I made tea like usual. Smiled like usual. I knew that if I confronted them now, I'd lose. They were too smooth, too prepared. Daniel was smart, manipulative. He'd twist it. Say I misunderstood. Make me look unstable. So instead I started listening more closely. I moved quieter around the house. I began taking photos of paperwork left on tables, forwarding emails that accidentally came to me, printing copies of anything with my name or the house attached. One afternoon, while cleaning the guest bedroom closet, I found a small lockbox tucked behind a stack of board games. Inside were papers, refinance applications, legal consultations, even a typed-up script for how Rebecca should present the conversation to me. The language was sickeningly sweet. Mom, we're worried about you. Mom, don't you want to relax in your later years? Mom, we'll take care of everything. You don't need this burden. Burden. That word burned in my chest. They were going to paint this as a kindness, as concern. All while stealing the home my husband and I built brick by brick. All while erasing me from the very life I had given up everything to build. That night I sat on the porch with an old photo album in my lap. Martin's face stared up at me from a fishing trip decades ago. Sunburned cheeks, proud grin, his arm around little Rebecca holding her first trout. I traced the edge of the photo with my finger and whispered, I'm sorry. I let them in. I thought love was enough. And then I cried. Not the loud kind. Not the kind you hear in movies. Just the slow, aching kind that slips down your face and soaks into your sweater without anyone noticing. The next morning I pulled out the dusty safe box from under my bed. Inside were the original house deed papers. I flipped through them slowly, checking every signature. Mine. Martin's. No one else's. The house was still in my name. They hadn't taken that from me yet. And I was going to make sure they never did. I called Diane, my husband's cousin, a notary who'd helped us with documents after Martin died. We hadn't spoken in years, but when she heard my voice she said, Margie, is everything all right? No, I said softly. But it will be. We met at her office the next day. I told her everything. She didn't interrupt. She just listened, her mouth a thin line, her fingers steepled beneath her chin. They're trying to move against you quietly, she said. You need to move faster. We began drafting protections. She recommended a lawyer she trusted. We made copies, filed statements, and scheduled a meeting with an estate planner. I was done waiting to be discarded. Done being quiet. Back at home I kept up the act. Made breakfast, asked about their day, smiled through dinner. But inside I was steel. Rebecca once said I made the best pie crust because I had patient hands. What she didn't realize is that patience isn't weakness. It's strategy. And I had waited long enough. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. I didn't plan to confront her that day, but some part of me knew it had to happen eventually. It was a Sunday morning, the kind that used to mean pancakes and music in the kitchen. Rebecca was at the sink rinsing berries. Daniel was watching some loud podcast in the living room, feet on the coffee table like he owned the place. I watched her for a moment, still as stone. Then I asked gently, "Becca, can we talk?" She glanced at me, clearly distracted. "Sure, what's up?" "In private." She wiped her hands on a dish towel and followed me to the sunroom. I closed the door behind us. For a second she looked nervous. Maybe she felt it too, the shift in the air. "I found the lockbox in the guest room," I said, straight to the point. Her face didn't move, but her knuckles whitened as she gripped the edge of the table. "I know about the power of attorney drafts, the refinancing papers, the script." She didn't speak. She didn't deny it. That silence, that awful cowardly silence, told me everything. "You were going to have me moved," I said. "Weren't you?" Her mouth open, closed. Then finally, "We were trying to protect you, Mom." I laughed. Not a happy laugh. A bitter one, full of disbelief. "Protect me from what?" "My own life. It's not safe for you to be managing all this alone," she said, her voice growing defensive. "You forget things. You misplace bills. Daniel and I are just trying to take control," I cut in. "Call it what it is." Now her anger flared. "You're being paranoid." "No," I said, and my voice didn't shake. "I'm being awake." She looked at me, then really looked. And for the first time I saw it in her eyes. Not guilt. Not love. Annoyance. "You make everything harder than it needs to be," she said, her voice low, bitter. "All we've done is try to give you peace, and you cling to control like it's oxygen." I stepped back, stunned. "I gave you this home. I cleaned up your husband's mess. I put my retirement into saving your future. And now I'm a burden." She didn't answer. She just looked away. That silence, that absolute refusal to even acknowledge the damage, was worse than yelling. Worse than tears. It was indifference. And that's when something inside me broke. Or maybe clicked. I walked out without another word. I spent the afternoon outside. My neighbor Clara was tending her roses. She's a sweet woman, 10 years younger than me but aging faster. We chatted about the weather, about squirrels digging up our bulbs again. Then suddenly she leaned closer and said, "I saw you sitting on the porch last night. You looked sad. Everything all right?" I wanted to lie, smile and say I was fine. Instead, I sat down on her porch step and whispered, "I think my daughter wants to erase me." She didn't ask for details. Just sat beside me, gently patting my hand. "You're not alone," she said. "More of us have lived this than you'd think." Something shifted again. A flicker of strength. I had people. I had history. I wasn't helpless. That night, I took out the documents Diane helped me prepare. I reread every clause, every line. I had removed Rebecca from my will. I'd added a contestation clause. If she tried to challenge anything, everything would go to charity. I'd contacted a real estate agent quietly. The house was still in my name. All the power they thought they had? It was borrowed, and soon I'd take it back. Over the next week, I moved differently. I stopped tiptoeing. I stopped playing the fool. When Daniel made some smug comment about how modern homes should be run, I smiled and said, "Well, this one isn't yours yet." He blinked. When Rebecca told me I shouldn't be climbing the attic stairs, I said, "Then don't watch me do it." The tension in the house grew thick. They could sense it, but they didn't know what was coming. One evening, I heard them whispering again. Behind closed doors, Daniel was pacing. Rebecca sounded tired, worn. "She's not backing down," she said. "She's bluffing," he muttered. "She has nothing." But I did. I had the deed. I had the will. I had every shred of leverage they thought they'd stolen from me. And soon I'd have the courage to use it. The only thing I hadn't decided was when. But life, as it often does, made that decision for me. 3 days later, Rebecca slid a brochure across the table at breakfast. A facility. A retirement option, she called it. Smiling too brightly, Daniel added, "They've got a garden. You love gardens." I looked at the paper. At the glossy photos. The fake smiles. Then I looked at them. And I realized they didn't love me. Not anymore. Maybe not ever in the way I'd loved them. And love that isn't returned, it isn't love at all. It's servitude. So I nodded slowly, folded the brochure and said, I'll think about it. But I already had. The lawyer's office was colder than I remembered. Or maybe it was just me. I sat in the high-backed leather chair. Hands folded in my lap, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Across from me, Mr. Langston, a quiet man with kind eyes and a sharp memory, adjusted his glasses and looked over the paperwork I'd brought. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances, Marjorie, he said gently. But I admire your clarity. I nodded. I wasn't sure clarity was the right word. Felt more like necessity, like survival. He began reading through the first page aloud, just so I'd hear it clearly. Last will and testament of Marjorie Ellen Carter. That name, my full name, sounded so formal, so final. But in a strange way it gave me strength. This will, he continued, revokes all previous wills and testaments. You've chosen to exclude your daughter, Rebecca, and her husband, Daniel, from any inheritance or claim to the estate. Yes, I said. No hesitation. He looked up. Do you want to add a letter of explanation? Sometimes it helps ease legal battles if things get contested. I want to add a clause, I said, reaching into my purse. Here. It was a printout Diane had helped me prepare. A contestation clause. If Rebecca or Daniel challenged the will, every asset, the house, the savings, even my grandmother's wedding ring, would be donated to a local charity that supports single mothers and widowed women. Poetic in a way. Mr. Langston read it, then gave a small smile. Firm but fair. And ironclad. I nodded again. I don't want a fight. I want peace. We spent the next hour going through every detail. The house title, the small savings I had left, the antique jewelry from Martin's side of the family. I made sure to protect it all. I even left a small stipend to Clara, my neighbor, to help care for her aging dog if anything happened to me. Felt right. When everything was finally signed and notarized, I exhaled for the first time in days. It felt like breathing after being underwater too long. Mr. Langston leaned back. Are you sure you're ready for this next part? I knew what he meant. Once I set the final plan in motion, the home sale, the removal, the confrontation, there was no turning back. No pretending. No hope that they'd suddenly change. But that hope had already died. Quietly, in the corners of my home. Over the months they chipped away at me with silence, eye rolls and whispered plans. Yes, I said. I'm ready. He stood, offered his hand. I shook it firmly. You're not alone, Marjorie, he said. I've seen a lot of cases like this, but not many with this kind of grace. I smiled, though it didn't quite reach my eyes. Grace wasn't what I was feeling. It was grief. When I got home, the house felt different. Still too still. The kind of silence that carries weight. Rebecca was out. Yoga, she'd said, though I knew from the tone she just wanted space from me. Daniel was in the garage doing something loud with metal and music. I didn't care to know what. I went to my room and opened the bottom drawer of the dresser, the one I hadn't touched in years. Inside was Martin's old flannel, the one he wore the winter we lost power for 3 days. I held it to my face, breathed in the faintest trace of him. I sat on the edge of the bed and whispered. I did everything I could. And I had. I had raised her with love. I had sacrificed my body, my youth, my peace to give her comfort. I had opened my home, my wallet, my heart. I had forgiven more than I should have. I had hoped long past reason. And now I had let go. That night I wrote 2 letters. The first was to Rebecca. I kept it short. Rebecca, I love you. I always will. But I no longer trust you to care for me, my home, or the life I work to build. This decision was not made in anger. It was made in sorrow, but also in strength. One day I hope you understand what it cost me, and what it freed me from. Mom. The second letter was to myself. Just 1 sentence. You are no one's burden. I folded both and tucked them in the drawer beside Martin's flannel. In the days that followed, I moved quietly. I contacted the real estate agent. Met with her twice. Showed her the back garden, the sunroom, the attic. She admired the home, told me she had buyers lined up. I didn't mention Rebecca and Daniel, because soon they wouldn't matter. It happened on a Thursday. The kind of day that pretends to be quiet. The sun was warm, birds were chattering near the window, and I had just finished folding the laundry when I heard them. Daniel's voice, low but sharp, coming from the garage. "I'm not waiting anymore," he said. "I told you the market's hot. We list the house now or we lose the opportunity." Rebecca's voice followed, brittle with worry. "But she still thinks it's hers. She'll never sign." "She doesn't have to," he snapped. "She's barely lucid half the time. I've been documenting things. We'll say she's confused. She left the oven on last week, remember? All we need is one doctor's note and—" I didn't hear the rest. I walked back to my room on steady legs, my ears buzzing with rage. That was the plan now? Declare me mentally unfit? Steal what little I had left using lies and paperwork? The oven. I remembered that day. I hadn't left it on. Daniel had preheated it and forgotten. I turned it off. I even mentioned it to Rebecca that evening. She brushed it off then. But now I understood. They'd turned it into ammunition. They were done waiting. They were about to move hard and fast. I sat down at my desk and opened the folder Diane and I had prepared. Inside were the finalized sale papers. The house was no longer on the market. It had already been sold. Cash offer. Quiet buyer. Expedited closing. Signed, sealed, and irreversible. The home they schemed to claim was no longer theirs to fight over. That evening, I came to dinner calm and composed. I set down the plates, served the food. Daniel grumbled about the lack of salt. Rebecca barely looked up from her phone. I looked at them both, my fork untouched. "I'll be moving out next week," I said simply. Daniel glanced up. "What?" "I've arranged alternative housing," I said. "More comfortable for someone my age." Rebecca blinked. "You did? Without telling us?" "I didn't want to burden you," I said. I kept my voice light but firm. "And don't worry, the new owners are giving you 30 days to vacate." Rebecca froze. "New owners?" I met her eyes. "I sold the house." Silence. Daniel dropped his fork. "You what?" "I sold the house," I repeated. "Last week. Closing was finalized yesterday." Rebecca stood, her chair scraping hard against the floor. "You're joking. That's not possible. Your name is still—" "My name was always on the deed," I said. "You never changed it. You tried. Quietly. But you never got the power of attorney. Never filed anything legally binding. It's mine. It was always mine." Daniel turned red. "You had no right to." "I had every right," I snapped. "And then I stood. I paid off your debt. I gave you a home. I trusted you. And you spent the last year scheming to put me in a facility and steal the last piece of my life. So yes, I sold it. And I'd do it again." Rebecca looked stunned. "Where are we supposed to go?" I stared at her, my heart breaking even as my resolve stayed solid. "I don't know," I said. "That's for you and your husband to figure out. You're adults. You made your choices." She sat down slowly, blinking like she was just waking up. "You actually did this?" "Yes," I said. "And I'm leaving. In a week. You have 30 days after that. Then the locks change." Daniel slammed his fist on the table, but I didn't flinch. Not this time. I was done flinching. I walked to my room and closed the door behind me. For a long time I just stood there, letting the silence settle. It didn't feel like defeat. It felt like relief. The next morning I packed one suitcase. Clothes, a few books, the photo of Martin and me from our wedding day, and the letter I wrote to myself. "You are no one's burden." I tucked it in the pocket of my coat. Clara helped me move into a quiet cottage 2 streets away. It was small, just 2 bedrooms and a garden out back, but it was mine. Fully paid for. Safe. I didn't tell Rebecca or Daniel where I went. I didn't owe them that. For the first time in decades, I slept without locking my door. I wasn't planning to go to the anniversary dinner. Rebecca had sent a text, short, cold, like everything between us now. 10 years this Saturday. Just a few people. 6 p.m. The house. The house. She still called it that, as if it were hers. It wasn't, of course. Not anymore. Still, I stared at that message for a long time. I imagined the smug smiles, the clinking glasses, Daniel playing host in a home he once tried to steal. I imagined Rebecca, charming and distant, pretending the last year never happened. And then I imagined myself standing in the doorway. So I went. I wore Martin's favorite brooch, the silver one with the little blue stone. It made me feel braver. I arrived just after 6. The sky was soft with dusk and the garden, the one I planted with my own hands, the one with Martin's ashes under the roses, had been cleared out and covered in gravel. A fire pit sat in the middle like it belonged. It didn't. I walked up the steps and opened the door without knocking. Inside, music played, some soft, jazzy thing I didn't recognize. A few guests stood around sipping wine. No one noticed me at first. Then Daniel turned. His face froze. What are you doing here? Rebecca appeared behind him, her smile faltering the second she saw me. Mom? I didn't think. You invited me, I said calmly. So I came. They exchanged a look. One of those silent arguments only couples can have without speaking. I'll only stay a moment, I said. I just wanted to bring you something. I reached into my bag and pulled out the manila envelope. The one with the real estate documents. The sale. The deed transfer. Everything. I thought you'd want to keep a copy of the sale records, I said. For your files. Rebecca blinked. What? You should know, I said. The new owners plan to renovate. That gravel pit out back? It's going to be a vegetable garden again. They think the soil's rich. Daniel snatched the envelope, eyes scanning the pages. You already sold it, he hissed. You really did. I nodded. Over a month ago. You've got 3 days left. The room had fallen quiet now. Guests stood frozen, unsure whether to watch or turn away. Someone near the back muttered, Is that her mother? Yes, I said, turning toward the crowd. I'm her mother. I raised her in this house. I paid off her husband's debt when they were drowning. And when I was no longer useful, they planned to put me away. Quietly. Legally. Like a problem to be erased. I looked back at Rebecca. But I don't disappear that easily. Her face was pale. Daniel was trembling with anger. You've embarrassed us, he spat. No, I said, voice steady. You did that all on your own. Rebecca stepped forward. Her voice cracked. Why are you doing this? Why now? Because this was supposed to be your home, I said, voice softening. But not through deceit. Not through betrayal. A home is earned, Rebecca. Not stolen. Silence. One of the guests, a woman I didn't recognize, set down her wine glass and quietly walked out the door. I turned to leave too. Goodbye, Rebecca. She reached out, but I stepped back. Don't. I walked out into the cool evening air. As the door closed behind me, I felt a strange stillness wash over me. Not joy. Not triumph. Just closure. I didn't cry. Not yet. But that night, as I sat in my little cottage, tea in hand, I looked around at the space I had claimed for myself. Every pillow, every shelf, every choice mine alone, and I smiled. Not because I'd won, but because I was free. Do you think the mother made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. The morning after the dinner, I woke before the sun. Old habits, I suppose. The kind you never shake. Even in a new bed, in a new home, my body rose with the birds. But this morning felt different. No banging cabinets. No Daniel blaring podcasts. No footsteps rushing past my door. Just stillness. A soft kind of quiet that filled the little cottage like warm light. I sat at the table wrapped in Martin's old cardigan, tea steeping beside me. And I waited. For a knock. For a message. For an apology that never came. Instead, silence. I checked my phone out of reflex. No new messages. Not from Rebecca. Not from anyone connected to her. I suppose part of me had hoped, foolishly, that she might come to her senses. That she might realize the weight of what she'd done. But the truth is, she didn't want to see it. And that silence, that deliberate, cutting silence, hurt more than the confrontation. It said, "You are no longer my mother." And I had to accept that. Still, the days moved forward one slow hour at a time. I walked each morning around the neighborhood. The air felt different here, freer. Neighbors waved. Dogs barked. One little boy on a scooter tipped his helmet at me every time he zoomed past. There was life. Small but real. At the grocery store, I bumped into Clara. She gave me a knowing smile and said, "I heard." Of course she had. "I hope you're sleeping better," she added gently. I am, I said. And I meant it. Because the kind of exhaustion I used to carry wasn't from old age. It was from holding on to people who no longer loved me in the way I needed. Letting go, as painful as it was, felt like dropping a boulder I'd been carrying for years. Still, there were moments that caught me. Like the second Tuesday when I walked past the old house and saw a truck in the driveway movers, packing up the last of Rebecca and Daniel's things. They were being escorted out by the new owners. A woman stood beside the porch, clipboard in hand. She glanced at me but didn't say anything. Neither did Rebecca. She saw me. We locked eyes for just a moment. And then she turned away. No wave. No smile. Just the back of her head as she stepped into her car and drove off. That was the last time I saw her. For a while anyway. Back at the cottage I kept busy. I rearranged furniture. Started a small herb garden on the windowsill. I pulled Martin's old record player out of storage and played his favorite jazz albums in the evenings, letting the music fill the spaces where voices used to be. It was lonely, yes, but it was also honest. No pretending. No eggshells. One afternoon while I was out trimming the rose bushes, a familiar voice called out from the gate. "Miss Marjorie?" I turned to see Evan, the neighbor boy with the scooter, standing there, fidgeting with a paper in his hand. "My grandma said you used to be a nurse," he said. "I have a science project about bones and stuff. Could you maybe help me?" I smiled. "Of course." He beamed. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table helping him label diagrams of the human skeleton. His little brow furrowed in concentration, tongue sticking out as he wrote femur in careful letters. And for the first time in weeks I laughed. Not bitterly. Not in pain. Just laughed. His grandmother sent over cookies the next day as thanks. "You've got good energy," she told me. "Our street's better with you on it." I nodded, swallowing a sudden lump in my throat. Maybe I hadn't lost everything after all. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I finished stitching the rabbit's ear, handed it back to a waiting Lila, and watched her run off to show her mother. That night, in the quiet of my cottage, I finally broke the seal. It was short. "Mom, I'm sorry. I was selfish. I let things get too far. I know I hurt you. We're staying with Daniel's brother now. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I just wanted you to know that I think about you. A lot. Rebecca." There was no return address. No invitation to talk. Just a quiet confession, sent into the world like a message in a bottle. I folded the letter and slid it into the same drawer where I'd kept the one I wrote to myself. "You are no one's burden." Two truths side by side. Later that week, someone else knocked on my cottage door. It was Jack, my grandson. I hadn't seen him in almost 2 years. He looked older now. Taller, sharper features, but the same warm eyes he had as a boy. "I found your address from a neighbor," he said. "Mom doesn't know I came." I let him in. We sat on the porch and drank lemonade. He told me he was in trade school now, studying auto repair. He was doing well. Living with a friend. Figuring life out. "She told me some of what happened," he said. "But I wanted to hear your side." So I told him. Not the bitter version. Just the truth. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he looked out over the yard and said, "You know, I remember this one time when I was little and you gave me $5 for a book fair. Mom said you didn't have much, but you still made sure I got that dinosaur book I wanted." I smiled. "You read it 3 times that day." He nodded. I never forgot that." And then he hugged me. A real hug. The kind that says, "I see you. I still need you." As he pulled away, he asked, "Can I come visit again?" "Anytime," I said. And I meant it. Because the house, the girls, the boy on my porch, this was family. Not perfect. Not planned. But real. It was late spring when she came. The trees had started to bloom again, and the air carried that faint sweetness of a season turning over. I was on the porch, trimming the edges of a worn quilt for the girls at the house, when I heard the gravel crunch under cautious tires. A black sedan pulled up slowly. The driver's door opened. It was Rebecca. She stepped out, hesitant, holding a small paper bag. Her hair was longer than I remembered, tied back neatly. Her clothes were plain, her shoulders drawn in like someone walking into a storm. I didn't move. Neither did she, not at first. Then after a few seconds she took one deep breath and walked toward the porch. I didn't stand. When she reached the steps she stopped. "Hi, Mom." I nodded. She held up the paper bag like a peace offering. "I brought your favorite. Lemon tea biscuits from Dawson's." I looked at the bag then back at her. "You remembered." "I remember a lot more than you think," she said softly. I waited. She sat down slowly on the edge of the porch, leaving a wide gap between us. We sat in silence for a long moment. The breeze picked up slightly. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked twice and went quiet. Finally she spoke. "I've been thinking. About everything. About what I did. What we did." Still I said nothing. "I don't know how to ask for forgiveness," she said. "And maybe I shouldn't. I don't deserve it." That at least felt honest. "I was angry," she continued. "But not at you. At myself. At Daniel. At the life we thought we were owed. We were drowning, and instead of taking your hand, we tried to pull you under with us." She looked down at her hands. "I think about it every day." I could hear the truth in her voice. The kind that only lives in regret. "I got your letter," I said. She looked up. "I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure I wanted to." A pause. "I thought you hated me," she said, her voice smaller now. "I thought I'd lost you forever." "You didn't lose me," I said. "You let me go." That hit her. Her eyes filled, but she blinked the tears away quickly. "I know I don't have a place in your life anymore," she said. "But if there's ever room even just for tea, I'd like to try again. Someday." I let the words settle. She didn't push. Didn't beg. And that, in itself, felt like a kind of growth. "I don't hate you," I said finally. "But I don't trust you either. Not yet." She nodded. "That's fair." We sat a while longer. She placed the bag gently beside me on the quilt and stood up. As she turned to leave, I said, "Rebecca." She paused. "Do you love him? Even now?" She swallowed. "I did. I don't know what I feel anymore. But I know I don't want to become like him." I nodded. She stepped down off the porch. "I hope Marjorie's house is everything you dreamed. It's becoming more than I ever imagined." Before she reached the car, she turned one last time. "You were always more than a mother," she said. "You were a compass." I didn't respond. Some wounds don't need words. Only time. After she drove away, I sat there for a long time, holding the paper bag in my lap. I opened it. The biscuits were still warm. Crumbly. Tangy with that sweet lemon glaze I used to make with her as a girl. I ate one slowly. Not as a sign of forgiveness, but as proof that healing, like spring, comes slowly, and only after the ground has been broken wide open. Would you have given your daughter another chance? Tell us below. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was small, just the way I wanted. No cameras. No press. Just the people who mattered. Janine stood beside me, her arm tucked around mine, grinning as the last of the balloons were tied to the porch railing. Someone had brought lemonade and cupcakes. One of the toddlers spilled juice on my shoes and I didn't even flinch. The sign went up that morning. A simple wooden plaque carved by one of the local volunteers. Marjorie's house. A place to begin again. I cried when I saw it. Not big tears. Just the kind that slip out when something feels finished. Not over but whole. 10 women now lived in the house. 10 lives trying to heal. 10 second chances I got to witness each day. Hannah had applied for nursing school. Rosa was working part-time at the bakery down the street. Alia had started journaling and left one of her entries on the kitchen table by accident. I read it when I cleaned that night. This house feels like a hug I didn't know I needed. I folded it carefully and tucked it into the drawer where I kept my own letters. The one from Rebecca. The one I wrote to myself. And now this. I had told Janine I didn't want to give a speech at the ceremony. I wasn't built for stages. But she insisted, just a few words. So when the time came, I stood on the front porch, in front of a small group of women, neighbors, and children clapping sticky hands together. I cleared my throat and said, "When I was younger, I thought home was something you gave your children. A roof. A meal. A soft place to fall. And I gave that with everything I had. I gave and gave, until I forgot that a home should also be for you." A soft murmur of agreement ran through the crowd. I lost that for a while. I lost myself too. But this place reminded me that home isn't walls or a deed or even blood. It's kindness, safety, love given without strings. I paused, looked out at the women on the porch, heads bowed, eyes shining. And when you've been broken, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is build again. Applause followed, gentle and sincere. I didn't cry this time. I just smiled. After the ribbon was cut and the lemonade cups emptied, I slipped into the kitchen. The sun filtered through the windows just like it used to in my old house. A familiar warmth. A light I hadn't felt in years. I looked at the framed photo on the counter, the only one I brought from my old life. Martin in his fishing hat, grinning, holding up that silly trout with Rebecca beaming beside him. I touched the edge of the frame and whispered, "We did something good, didn't we?" The door creaked behind me. I turned. It was Jack. He'd started visiting once a week now, sometimes to talk, sometimes to help with yard work, sometimes just to sit in silence with me. "Thought I'd bring these," he said, holding up a box of coloring books and crayons. "One of the kids at the house said she wants to be an artist." "You'll make her day," I said, taking the box. He looked around the kitchen. "This place, it feels alive." "It is." We stood there for a moment, just breathing in the soft hum of chatter from the other room. The clink of glasses, the faint sound of a child giggling down the hall. Then Jack asked, "Do you miss the old house?" I thought for a moment. "I miss the rose garden," I said. "But no, I don't miss the house. I miss who I thought I was inside of it." Jack nodded. "I think you're better now." "Me too." As he turned to go, he paused. "I'm proud of you, Grandma." I smiled. "Thank you." After he left, I walked back outside and stood at the edge of the porch, watching the sun dip low behind the trees. The light stretched across the front lawn like a promise. The women were gathered on blankets with their children. Someone strummed a guitar softly. Lila, now talking in sweet baby sentences, ran toward me, arms outstretched. Miss M. Miss M. Look." She held up a drawing. A shaky little house with flowers, a big sun, and stick figures smiling in the yard. "That's you," she said, pointing to the biggest one. "You're the one with the hair." I laughed. "You made me look beautiful." "You are," she said, very matter of fact. And I believed her. Because I wasn't the same woman who had been pushed out of her own home. I wasn't the mother who begged to be seen, the widow who gave until there was nothing left, the woman who thought survival meant silence. I was something new now. Something rooted. Marjorie's house wasn't just a building. It was a living thing. Final act of love. A home reborn.